As we finish up talking about intelligence, you'll notice we started with kind of a very narrow view, the concept of IQ. When we started Alfred Binet, and really we talked about just maybe how limited that might be with um, just looking at linguistic or mathematical intelligence. We expanded that a little bit as we looked at multiple intelligence theory by Howard Gardner, and just how that kind of widened the tent a little bit. We want to go out even broader with this last intelligence theory we're going to look at, and it is the Triarchic theory of intelligence. It's a guy named Robert Sternberg that's going to come up with this, and he is looking for really just in kind of the broadest terms what it means to be intelligent. Now, if you're listening at home, I'm going to put a couple of talks, one TED Talk and another talk by Dr. Sternberg on the playlist. I'll be playing those for folks that are live and in person. But you may want to head over to the YouTube playlist to check out those videos. Basically, triarchic, right? The tri suggests that there are three parts to what's going to be happening, and there are three parts to Dr. Sternberg's theory of intelligence. So you'll see three different terms that are used there: componential, experiential, and contextual. Usually, you hear it analytical, creative, and practical, but either one of those terms is going to work. They're very interchangeable. So when we look at the red portions, usually the first one that people talk about, analytical intelligence is the ability to look at the information that's coming in, to think about it in ways where almost you're thinking about how you're going to process it. You're not thinking about the specific information that's coming in. It is enabling you to figure out which ones of your skills you need to use to even begin to process what the information is. Once we learn how we best process information, that can really help us as we're seeking to learn more specific things. So as you take classes, as you guys move on to college and things like that, you'll find that there are study techniques that work for you. There are things that you do to retain, for instance, things that you've read, and those are going to be skills that you develop over your higher academic career. And the idea is you learn how you best do these things, and then you can adapt those kind of regardless of subject matter to what's going to need to happen. And so analytical intelligence is almost the ability just to look at the situation and to figure out what's going to be the most effective path for you to get through. Creative intelligence is your ability to be creative. If analytical intelligence is kind of a little more process oriented, creative intelligence is coming up with new ideas, coming up with connections between things where there may not be obvious connections that are going to be readily available. And so creative, a lot of times we think of creativity and we think of people that can paint or write songs, and that's definitely a part of this, but it can also be people who can just do new things with really anything they're working with. You can have creative accountants, people that we don't think of as being very creative, but people that understand new ways to do things with whatever information it is that they're given. The last one is practical intelligence, and it's more the application model of what you know. What can you do in a particular environment to maximize your strengths? Right? How can you play to what you're very good at? And how can you mitigate your weaknesses? How can you, it doesn't mean necessarily covering them up, but it means understanding what they are and then dealing with how you make up for those things. One of my favorite guys in history is a guy named General George Patton, who's a World War II guy, if you remember from talking about that. And he was not a very good student. There have been historians who suggested that had he been alive in 2020, 2021, he would have probably tested positive for a learning disability. When he went to the military academy, he knew immediately he wasn't going to distinguish himself in the classroom. He just wasn't going to be able to academically keep up with his peers. But he knew that he could maximize other strengths. And so, if the classroom wasn't going to be a place to distinguish himself, he really focused on being very military, the way that he dressed, the way that he interacted with other people. And he knew that was his way of distinguishing himself, right? That's a practical type of intelligence. He's looking and saying, I'm not very good at this one thing, but I'm really good over here. So to make up for my deficiencies, I need to work really hard in some other areas. And so that's really the triarchic theory of intelligence. And so you can see it's in a broader sense, really, than even the more specific IQ test or multiple intelligence test. This is more looking at a general intelligence that people would have. Just to break it down again, right? Compositional. What are the pieces of this problem, right? What is it? How's this made up? How do I even need to go about kind of attacking this particular issue? Experiential intelligence is a way of saying, how do my experiences, what do I have in my wheelhouse? What have I done before that can help me to solve the problem that I'm going to be presented with? And finally, contextual. Basically, what is it about the environment that's helping or hindering this problem? How can I use what's in the environment to my advantage? What are some drawbacks, or what are some things I may want to avoid because of the environment that this is in? So really, to understand and to be intelligent, as Dr. Sternberg would talk about it, it's much more about the situation, your assessment of the situation, and what particular skills you bring to the table to help you address that. And so these are all things that you've got to consider as you look at these ideas of intelligence. So, like I said, that's the last one we're going to take a look at, but it is the triarchic theory of intelligence.